In this video, we're going to give an introduction to Chapter 2, which is a continuation of the same sort of concept as Chapter 1. It's basically a general introduction to chemistry overall. In this chapter, it focuses on some primary topics, and at the beginning of this chapter, there are several things that you're going to work on your own. So if you remember, we had said that the first couple of sections of Chapter 2, in our introduction to Chapter 1, you were going to have to kind of look at and study on your own. So the two that you're going to have to study on your own are the John Dalton and Our Modern System of Chemical Philosophy. So this just talks about the three laws of matter, conservation of mass, and things like that. So that's something that you're going to want to look at and read and make sure that you can understand it. Try the problem boxes in the textbook. And then there are several things in atomic structure that we're not going to cover. We do pick up with atomic symbols. So we kind of pick up starting right here at atomic symbols, and then we go from there. We don't really go through the whole history of how the electron, proton, and neutron were discovered. You should read that on your own and understand it for the exam. We're going to pick up with kind of the more practical aspects of that. And then we have the periodic table. This, again, is something that you should read on your own and really look at it. We are going to give a sort of a broad overview of the periodic table in lecture, but that's a good one to take a look at on your own. Now, here comes the most important thing. So we're going to talk about compounds, primarily ionic compounds, and how we work with ionic compounds, how we balance ionic compounds in charge. And then the biggest two things from this chapter are going to be nomenclature. So nomenclature is how we name things. Nomenclature is the process by which we go about naming all of the different compounds we have. So sodium chloride, for example, that name is not just an arbitrary name, it's actually a systematic name. And when we learn how to do nomenclature, you're going to be able to name monatomic and polyatomic ions. We'll be able to name ionic compounds that contain those monatomic or polyatomic ions. And then we're going to be able to name molecular compounds. So that's a very powerful tool. And this is going to require some memorization. So you're going to have to memorize the polyatomic ions, their names and their charges, which is a table. And you're also going to have to memorize the charges of various atoms, various elements on the periodic table. And we're going to show you a sort of a simple way of doing that with the periodic table. And then the last major section of this chapter is chemical reactions. So with chemical reactions, we're going to be talking about mostly balancing reactions. So we're going to teach you a systematic way to balance reactions, and that really represents the bulk of Chapter 2. So in the next couple of seconds, we're going to take a look at what resources are available to help you on Blackboard. On Blackboard, there are some resources for Chapter 2 that are available to you. So if you click into the extra study materials for each chapter and then click on Chapter 2, we have a kind of a list of things in here that you can use to help you out. So with every chapter, again, we have the drills and solutions, which are good practice for the exam. And then we also have the slides. So all of the lecture slides that we use in the videos can be found here. The nomenclature packet is something that's going to be really helpful to you. So one of the biggest topics in Chapter 2 is nomenclature. And this is naming compounds and identifying the molecular or ionic formula of compounds from a systematic name. So what this packet basically has is a whole bunch of examples. There are compounds that need to be named, and there are names that need to have compounds written. And then for each of these pages, it has the solutions. So what you want to do is you want to use this as a practice for making sure that you know nomenclature. So you want to start by studying your nomenclature, memorizing the tables, doing the practice problems in the textbook, and then you can kind of come here last. If you can fill this whole chart out without having to look at any of the tables in the textbook, looking up any of the charges for the ions, you'll be in very good shape for the exam. This is a good indicator that you know what you're doing for the exam. And this covers ionic compounds and molecular compounds. Okay, so we have, in some cases, we're going to go over problems in lecture or on the lecture slides. I may say this is a problem for you to try at home, in which case, oftentimes the solutions will be available. So there's an isotopic abundance problem that may appear in the lecture slides, or it may appear in a synchronous meeting that we have, and the solutions to that can be found here. Then we have some tutorials, how to balance ionic formulas. So in this case, you'll get two ions, and then it'll say, okay, tell me the correct formula for those two ions when they form an ionic compound. This is some practice on how to balance chemical equations. We have some practice on isotopes and isotopic abundance. So this pretty much covers the content